If you do things differently, you'll get different outcomes, even if you can't predict exactly what they will be and don't have the evidence to prove it yet. A friend asked us, the Collective Impact Agency, for an example of this recently, and we weren't short of examples. We just hired a new member of staff, Lara, into a new role of Insights and Communications Lead. In recruiting them, we'd tried to do recruitment differently. You might reasonably ask, why on earth do you want different outcomes in your recruitment process? Surely all recruitment processes, no matter how wacky they are, aim for the same outcome, the recruitment of a person into a job. Well, yeah. But everyone who plays a part in that recruitment has an experience. Often that experience is not a particularly nourishing one. You might be the candidate who gets rejected at the written application stage after an evening spent shoehorning your experience into a cover letter that covers the person spec in the job description line by line, which is rewarded by an impersonal thanks but no thanks email. You might be the recruiter reading through 100 CVs and cover letters. While some are clearly stronger than others, they're still basically the same as one another. You don't really get a sense of who they are as human beings. Everyone tells you about their excellent communication skills, how they work really well, both individually and as part of a team. Let's face it, it's a bit boring. What if writing or reading applications could be a valuable experience, even fun? Many of us have experiences of both recruiting and being recruited. Experiences that range from the, well, it was fine, to that was a waste of an evening, right through to that interview was downright traumatizing. Recruitment is so often done in a way that treats people like cogs in a machine. Recruiting is effectively choosing the right size cog for that part of the mechanism. But people aren't cogs, they're people. And the mechanism around them isn't made of machine parts, that's made of people too. So, we wanted to design a recruitment process that put people at the heart of it. One that would be fun and interesting to be a part of. That would pay attention to the fact that people have feelings and that going through a recruitment process is an emotive activity. One of the things we did that isn't standard practice was to not ask people for their CVs. In fact, we actively asked them not to send us their CVs. Instead, we asked people to send us a couple of pages answering a few questions and, because this is a comms job, an example of some comms they would put out for the company. My boyfriend is a professional recruiter. This whole no CVs thing gave him the heebie-jeebies. There were a few reasons why we didn't want to see CVs. Firstly, we didn't want to be prescriptive about the kind of experience needed. I have a friend who has this amazing side hustle that involves a lot of comms work, but it's something she does for fun. It's not her actual job. She doesn't have comms manager in her job title. That would write her off for many recruiters. We had some great applications from people who don't do comms for their main job for whatever reason. Secondly, we wanted to reduce our own bias in what we were expecting from a potential applicant. I didn't want to see the career trajectory that a person has been through, as much of that will have been influenced by the structures of the organisations that they've been in, and the structure of the system in which we all work. We didn't want to focus on previous positions as a metric for judging whether a person is suitable for the job, because many people are overlooked for promotion because of structural disadvantages and inequalities in society. Size and type of organisation is also a factor in the expertise you develop. So we wanted to free candidates up to focus on their expertise itself, rather than on job titles. So what unexpected outcomes did we see from asking people to send us something other than a CV? One outcome was particularly relevant given we were recruiting for a comms job. Each application we received ended up being a unique piece of comms that gave us more insight into the person and demonstrated their ability. It added real value to what we were reading. For this position, it really made sense for this not to just be a list of facts like a CV is. It made me more aware that job applications are a piece of comms. You're trying to sell yourself to get someone to buy into you as a person and draw them into your world so that they'll interview you. Several candidates came back to us to say they genuinely enjoyed writing their job applications. And I don't think that they were blowing smoke up our asses. I honestly believed it when they said it. They were getting to lean into their skills as comms professionals and really let loose. The application that Lara, who got the job, sent us was a work of art. It was beautiful and intriguing in equal measure. It drew us in and made us want to know more about this person. With hindsight, I'm not sure we needed people to also send us an example of the comms they'd want to put out for the company as well. An example of something they'd already done that they were proud of, coupled with their application, would have been enough. I don't even remember what Lara put together for their comms example. I was so wowed by the application letter, it didn't really matter. The extra work wasn't necessary. It surprised me just how culturally entrenched having a CV is. There appears to be an idea that an application is only an application if you're providing a detailed job history. Despite being explicit with our request, we still received CVs. Some people didn't pay attention to the application process. Some people sent what we had asked for but couldn't resist sending in their CV as though their application didn't feel complete without it. So, not asking for CVs, that was one unusual step we took, and it paid off. My absolute favourite part of our experiment, however, was offering Q&A sessions. Before people submitted a written application, they had the opportunity to meet us in a group setting through a Zoom webinar. If they couldn't make one of the sessions, they had the invitation to arrange a call with me just for a chat about the role on the company. We wanted to make sure that these were accessible, so we offered 2 Q&As at different times, lunchtime and early evening, to account for people having 9-to-5 jobs and/or caring responsibilities. We clarified expectations in the advert that these weren't part of the assessment process, and people didn't have to ask questions. Recruitment is a two-way thing. The Q&As were an opportunity for people to meet us, ask us questions, see if they think they would enjoy working with us. What surprised us in the Q&As was that the focus of the questions wasn't on the role itself, but on us. People tried to get to the heart of how we think. They really took up the opportunity to explore the workplace, see if the way we talk about the company and ourselves on the website was what we are like in real life. Spoiler alert, it is. What you see is kind of what you get. We had some real gutsy questions like, do you feel any kind of trepidation at the prospect of bringing a new person in? The honest answer was, yeah. It was important that people felt that they could ask honest questions and that we would give honest answers. Most people who attended the Q&As did apply. We made ourselves vulnerable without corporate sugarcoating, which in turn meant people were more vulnerable with us when they wrote their applications. We got a stronger sense of who they are as people than we had ever done in more traditional recruitment processes. The Q&As did some work in levelling the power dynamic between recruiter and recruited, in that the interviewers became the interviewees, which allowed for a more human connection throughout the process. We'll never be able to completely level that power dynamic, but it feels right that we should try. It also gave people insights into the company which they used in their applications. With hindsight, if we'd made the Q&As mandatory, it might have put people on more of a level playing field. One of the 3 people we put through to interview stage, out of around 100 applications, didn't make it to a Q&A. So it clearly didn't disadvantage her in the application process. But it might have made the interview stage a bit more comfortable for her. As she'd have got a sense of our vibe, she would have known who she was meeting before she joined that Zoom call, as the other 2 did. So what about other unusual stuff we did that I'd do again? Well, between the written application stage and the interview stage, we had a task stage. As this was a comms job, we asked them to put together some comms. So far, so normal. But we wanted the task to give them an insight into what it is like to be part of this company, not just what the job involves. We believe that supported autonomy is a vital component of any life-giving job. That is, people have the freedom to decide what they do and how, and their colleagues' role is to help them to shape it and do it without telling them what it should be, as well as giving them pastoral support. We also know that moving from a strictly hierarchical and highly structured working environment to an autonomous one is a scary one. You go down what we call the debilitation curve until you work out how to fly. We wanted to warn candidates that this was on the cards if they joined the Collective Impact Agency. So we gave them a 20-minute recording of us sharing our thoughts and insights about autonomy and asked them to turn it into a piece of comms. It was a task about autonomy which they were being asked to design and complete autonomously. Our successful candidate, Lara, produced an amazing 7-minute video about it. It was so good that we asked them if we could use it when they joined the company and paid them back for the time it took to produce it in their application. I think if you're going to ask people to produce new work as part of an application process, you have to be prepared to pay them if you use it. Back to other things we did. We sent out interview questions in advance, so people had a week to prepare their answers. As an introvert and a slow processor, I'll give you much better answers if I have time to think. The idea of sending interview questions in advance is gaining increasing amounts of traction, and I think that's a great thing. Perhaps more unusually, we co-created the interviews with the candidates. We told them what kinds of things we wanted to cover, mostly the same questions for each candidate, with one question their particular application had raised for us. And we asked them what they wanted to ask us and what they wanted us to ask them about. The lists became very long, so we all came to the interviews with a first and second preference of question, so everyone would get to cover what they really wanted. I wish we'd cut down those question lists in advance so candidates didn't spend time preparing answers for questions that they didn't get asked. In that respect, we accidentally recreated one of my pet hates about normal interviews, where you might prepare answers for every question you can think of and get asked only a small proportion, if any. I had feedback calls with people at all stages of the process. I didn't proactively offer it for the written application stage, but if people asked for it, I gave it. Throughout the process, we asked people for feedback about their experience of the process. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, as well as some really great constructive feedback. One of the pieces of feedback that we got which surprised me was, "It was great you did what you said you would do." As in, we set out in the job pack what the deadlines would be for each stage in the process, when we would communicate outcomes to people, that sort of thing, and we stuck to those dates. The fact that people found that impressive is, quite frankly, a depressing indictment of just how dehumanising recruitment processes often are. Lara said this is the only job application they've ever sent in that included upfront when to expect communication. We can't even give people the basic courtesy of giving our word and sticking to it. If we, as recruiters, are not willing to demonstrate that we can be trusted, and that we will and do care about our colleagues, both actual and prospective, how can we expect people to just show up to recruitment processes themselves? Shouldn't we, as recruiters, model the expectations that we have of one another when recruitment is done and dusted and we're working together as a company? I have 11 pages of notes about our recruitment process, the things we tried and the surprising and not so surprising things that happened as a result. Naturally, I've had to edit myself considerably, else we'd be here all day. If you wanted to talk more about doing recruitment differently, email letters@ciacic.com for a chat. I love a chat. Since we're on the subject of doing things differently, we're going to do this differently too, and offer bite-sized chunks of podcast that we like to refer to as Beancasts, part of a pod but without all the stringy paraphernalia, as a mini-series where we'll unpack and explore all sorts of other things, as well as recruitment. It's been a journey. Please join us next time as we keep a finger on the pulses of recruitment. Lara wrote this bit.
And Lara finds it hilarious that this made the final edit.
Anyway, join us again for other terrible bean-based puns. I've been, and continue to be, Abby Taylor of the Collective Impact Agency. Bye!